Is there a chair I can sit on?
Right there.
In neuroscience and psychology, the concepts of love and fear are more than just emotions. They relate to how the deepest unconscious regions of our brain operate. How the reptilian brain only craves what it lacks and is unaware of what it takes for granted. And how what we believe we lack ends up defining what we love. And by gaining insight into the realms of our unconscious mind and the reality that it emerges from, we are presented with a choice.
I don't even know how.
The most important decision.
Like, I see the parts I'm not done, but.
Her hair is gonna take a long time. There's a lot of highlights on her hair.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Wow, that's gonna be cool when it's done, though.
That is a good picture.
For real.
I'm just sitting up here thinking like, cause this the only painting I got right now. I need something next. I gotta figure out.
You modeled with her before?
No, I actually talked to the photographer. I don't know the model.
Oh.
But the photographer said it was cool for me to use this picture.
This is dope.
But now I really just want to do some of my own stuff. Like my last two paintings were from other photographers. I need to photograph some stuff. I got some ideas, but I can't really figure out how to work them out. I want to do something with like the golden ratio.
You know how you might incorporate it?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Like I did the ones of me naked and that were in the room had the chemical equations on it.
Yeah.
So I want to like do some more like that. I don't know how to add like math to it and make it look cool. Like, I've seen some other people's stuff. It kind of like they throw like math equations and stuff in their art, but I ain't want to.
Are we talking like A plus B minus X, like some stuff like that? Or
yeah.
Like in the background, like how did they do it?
Yeah, kind of. There's this one chick, man. She photographed herself, man, and she photoshopped it where like the colors are so like it's super saturated. And then she whites out one of her eyes and has a triangle over it and has the golden ratio in it. Then that shit expounds, and then there's like some other fucking equation in the background, but it looks like holographic. Like some of them are floating. Yo, I can't really describe.
And you saw that from an artist here?
Huh?
You saw that from an artist that live here?
No, that's on Instagram.
Oh, okay. So I might have to follow that because that sounds dope.
Yo, her stuff is hot. How she does it sometimes, and I want to try to do something like that because I like math and science. But then, like I just was looked up what is consciousness. I said I've been back on that for a minute, but like to try to visualize a conception of consciousness. Like I just had an idea.
Wait. I don't know why this came to my head, but like, I have a theory, right? So, God, right? Like, let's say like a God or like the energy, right? You can't see it, you can't visualize it. So, we have no idea how it looks like. We also have that in common with consciousness. right?
Yeah.
So what if consciousness and God are one and the same?
That's
Because they have something in common.
yeah.
Some of the biggest mysteries we have in common with God. We don't word the energy like you can call it whatever you want to call it, nature or source consciousness. Is you know
So that's
it
all
has
it
something
is.
in common. It
It's a,
has something to do with one another.
and people just call it God, but like it's not like some dude sitting up on some throne somewhere with demons and angels going to war and all this crazy stuff. But it is
Yeah,
like I do think there is like a supreme consciousness.
yeah.
This my homie let me listen to this right here. What's that? Why isn't it coming?
The readers of Bulwer's Zanoni and similar tales will begin to form. Life appears and manifests in higher and higher form, the absolute and the relative, which perplex all students of philosophy, and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of the half-truth. With this in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality, against which idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and the relative points of view. From the absolute viewpoint, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria, as compared to the all in itself. We recognise this even in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies. For the element of impermanence and change, finiteness and unsubstantiality must ever be connected with the idea of a created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the all, no matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both. Philosopher, metaphysician, scientist and theologian all agree upon this idea, and the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions, as well as in the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. So, the Hermetic teachings do not preach the unsubstantiality of the universe. In any stronger terms,
But this right here goes into, like you're saying, whatever it is, they call it the all. The all is all there is. It encompasses everything. It is the universe and everything in it. And we are a part of it. So we exist within the consciousness of the all. We're just the aperture of the supreme consciousness. It's kind of deep. It's a whole audio book too called The Kabbalah. And that's how they go into saying like everything is connected, everything is one. But what is consciousness? I like it.
Is whether we believe we live in a friendly or a hostile universe.
Got a voice.
While this quote from Albert Einstein sounds relatable, one can wonder why a man of his profound intelligence would specifically claim this is the most important decision we make.
What up, bro?
This
What y'all getting
documentary
into?
answers that question. Tens of thousands of papers are published each year in the field of neuroscience alone. Our knowledge and understanding of the inner workings of our mind and of our universe is expanding at an astounding rate. If you seek rational answers to fundamental questions about consciousness, this documentary could change your life.
Yeah, everything's gonna change your life.
Yeah, for real. He's like
This
Tom
The
Holland
human
right now.
brain is by far the most sophisticated phenomenon that
I don't think I can get past the voice. Were you on that Red Dead?
Has Mrs. Waterford? You haven't?
Oh, Days Gone. I was watching somebody else play that the other day, man. Like, I said, I'd rather watch y'all play games now than get on my stuff. I swear.
Obvious difference. But to this patient, P.S., they looked completely identical. S had suffered a stroke that damaged the right side of her brain, leaving her unaware of everything on her left side. But though she could discern no difference between the houses, when researchers asked her which she would prefer to live in, she chose the house that wasn't burning. Not once, but again and again. S's brain was still processing information from her whole field of vision. She could see both images and tell the difference
Yeah,
between
same
them.
here,
She
bro.
just didn't
I was
know.
thinking about playing some games tonight,
To a
man.
ball at her left side, she might duck, but she wouldn't have any
I've been
awareness
running
of the
around
ball
every day
or
for
any
like
idea why
the
she
past
ducked.
week.
S's condition, known as hemispatial neglect, reveals an important distinction between the brain's processing of information and our experience of that processing. That experience is what we call
See, the
consciousness.
eyes look different now.
We are conscious of both the
I really just
external
gotta put the
world
lashes on
and
this.
our internal selves. Aware of an image in much the same way we are aware of ourselves looking at an image, or our inner thoughts and emotions. But where does consciousness come from? Scientists, theologians, and philosophers have been trying to get to the bottom of this question for centuries without reaching any consensus. One recent theory is that consciousness is the brain's imperfect picture of its own activity. To understand this theory, it helps to have a clear idea of one important way the brain processes information from our senses. Sensory input, it builds models, which are continuously updating simplified descriptions of objects and events in the world. Everything we know is based on these models. They never capture every detail of the things they describe, just enough for the brain to determine appropriate responses. One model built deep into the visual system codes white light as brightness without color. In reality, white light includes wavelengths that correspond to all the different colors we can see. Our perception of white light is wrong and oversimplified, but good enough for us to function. Likewise, the brain's model of the physical body keeps track of the configuration of our limbs, but not of individual cells or even muscles, because that level of information isn't needed to plan movement. If it didn't have the model keeping track of the body's size, shape, and how it is moving at any moment, we would quickly injure ourselves. The brain also needs models of itself. For example, the brain has the ability to pay attention to specific objects and events. It also controls that focus, shifting it from one thing to another, internal and external, according to our needs. Without the ability to direct our focus, we wouldn't be able to assess threats, finish a meal, or function at all. To hold focus effectively, the brain has to construct a model of its own attention. With 86 billion neurons constantly interacting with each other, there's no way the brain's model of its own information processing can be perfectly self-descriptive. But like the model of the body, or our conception of white light, it doesn't have to be. Our certainty that we have a metaphysical, subjective experience may come from one of the brain's models, a cut-corner description of what it means to process information in a focused and deep manner. Scientists have already begun trying to figure out how the brain creates that self-model. MRI studies are a promising avenue for pinpointing the networks involved. These studies compare patterns of neural activation when someone is and isn't conscious of a sensory stimulus, like an image. The results show that the areas needed for visual processing are activated whether or not the participant is aware of the image, but a whole additional network lights up only when they are conscious of seeing the image. With hemispatial neglect, like PS, typically have damage to one particular part of this network. Extensive damage to the network can sometimes lead to a vegetative state, with no sign of consciousness. Evidence like this brings us closer to understanding how consciousness is built into the brain, but there's still much more to learn. For instance, the way neurons in the networks related to consciousness compute specific pieces of information is outside the scope of our current technology. As we approach questions of consciousness with science, we'll open new lines of inquiry into human identity. To exploring life's big questions, check out this playlist.
Consciousness is perhaps the biggest riddle in nature. Stripped to its core meaning, consciousness is what allows us to be aware both of our surroundings and of our own inner state. But thinking about consciousness has this habit of taking us round in circles. We all intuitively know what consciousness is. It's this. It's what you're experiencing here, right now. But once we try to pinpoint just what exactly it is, it leaves us grasping at thin air. And not just us. Philosophers and scientists struggle to define consciousness. Different schools and ideas compete with one another, but no one has come close to figuring it out. It's unsettling to realize that we don't understand what makes us aware of ourselves and the world. In this fuzzy area, consciousness and intelligence are also related, although they are not the same. We'll talk in greater depth about theories of consciousness and intelligence in other videos. Like much of what makes us human, our consciousness is likely to have evolved from less complex forms as a product of evolution by natural selection. It has probably emerged from an immense several 100 million year sequence of countless microsteps that together make up a sort of gradient of consciousness. What was the first step on this path from the non-conscious to the basic consciousness that ultimately led to the convoluted consciousness we humans enjoy today? Take a stone. The consensus is that a stone is not conscious, though not everyone agrees even on this. Some panpsychists claim that a lump of rock may have an inner life. However, there are no real grounds for any such assumption, since stones never show behavior. Their inner life can neither be proven nor disproven. A more common starting point is with living things. A living thing, or a self, is a part of the universe that sustains itself and makes more of its kind. To do so, it needs energy. And this is where an awareness of the world comes in handy. The original function of consciousness was probably to direct a mobile self that was short of energy to a fresh supply of food. On the smaller scales of life, you don't need to be aware to find food. Trichoplax adherens, one of the simplest of all animals, moves around haphazardly. It slows down in the presence of food and speeds up in its absence. This is highly effective and makes the tiny creature spend more time where there is food than where there is not. But it never moves in a particular direction towards a particular target, and there's no need for it to be conscious of its environment. The first major step towards consciousness was probably taken when mobile selves started to move themselves directionally, moving towards what was good for them, say food, and away from what was less good, say someone else who thought that they were food. Take Dugicia tigrina, a tiny worm known for its funny face. Sometimes the worm is hungry, and sometimes not. This means that when it moves, the worm self is not simply producing an automatic response to an external stimulus, but that its actions depend upon its inner physiological state, whether it's hungry or sated. When it's just eaten, the worm is less energetic, but when starved for a while, it will move itself in the direction of tasty things. It uses chemoreceptors on its head to smell its environment and guide it in the direction where the scent of food is strongest. After finding and eating a meal,
Happy Friday.
our worm buddy heads back to a dark, sheltered spot to digest it in safety, until it's hungry again. But animals that blindly follow their sense of smell don't have a concrete objective in view. They still lack any sense of where they are heading. So the next step on the ladder of consciousness is to add some perception at a distance, like vision. Vision adds context and depth to our world. With vision comes a sense of the space we and our food exist in. It adds a whole new dimension to awareness and is a huge step towards more familiar consciousness. An optical apparatus like an eye enables us to visualize our goal and lock onto it. But even at this stage, a self is only...
How did the eye form? Like the very, very earliest stages of evolution, man, that shit is so tricky. Like scientists just gotta tap dance all around probabilities. Given enough time, anything will happen. So you telling me just all of a sudden, like, some goddamn algae became conscious and decided it needed eyes to see, to be more conscious? Come on, man. The eye is so complex, it's ridiculous. I'm just saying.
able to pursue its food as long as it sees it. So the next logical step needs to happen on the inside. To visualize food in its absence, for example, a self needs to create some sort of inner representation of the world. Now an animal can continue looking for food even when it escapes its sensory range. Because of this inner representation of what is relevant in the world, it can remain focused on its food and its desire to get it. Our self now exists in a world it can get familiar with. The ability to remember things has emerged. Thanks to memory, animals can be distracted from a pursuit for a few seconds, but quickly continue their path afterwards. A related phenomenon is called object permanence. This describes our awareness that things continue to exist even when we can't see them. This cognitive skill is enjoyed by some mammals and birds, and perhaps other animals too. Human babies tend to develop this ability around the time they turn 8 months, while baby chickens show this ability within a day or two of being born. The capacity to remember a thing in its absence suggests at least a basic sense of time.
That's something else with humans too. Like, we're so weak and fragile from the time we're born to like for years, 5 years, you know, and even then it's still weak and fragile. But a horse, man, a baby horse come out, that motherfucker stand right up, start running around. A baby elephant stand right up, run around. They certain animals, like, they ready to be born. Like humans, it's weird, yo, because we need so much nurture for so many years, yo, before we're able to really do anything on our own. And goddamn, like you say, chickens, birds, man, they be ready to fly in months. We can't even walk for a year.
Of time is a big step on the ladder of consciousness. It may also enable a self to look forward from the present moment and anticipate the future. Adult chickens, for example, are able to resist a meal put in front of them if they expect to receive a bigger meal as a prize for holding back for a while. This sort of delayed gratification means there is an ability to visualize a reward that only exists in the future, which can be quite a challenge even for adult humans. Western scrub jays are experts in delayed gratification. They show an even more elaborate sense of the future when they hide food in a cache to retrieve it at a later date. The scrub jays will even re-hide their food if they become aware that a potential means that they know that there are other hungry selves out there who are aware and see the world from their own different perspective. Crafty scrub jays can sort of read the mind of their fellow birds. This ability to mind read is crucial for complex levels of consciousness. By putting yourself in the position of others, you can outsmart a rich competitor or empathize with a hungry friend. Language takes the ability to read minds and represent what is absent to a whole new level. Words enable us to construct hypotheses about the world, make detailed plans, and to communicate them with others. Words enable us to think about ourselves and our place in the universe, and even about our own consciousness, which is something we'll be doing more in future videos. So, what is the origin of our consciousness? It probably began as the directed motion of a hungry self towards a source of food, with the survival benefits this gave it over competitors that moved at random or not at all. It probably all started with the urge for more food. So even with the sophisticated consciousness that allows us to dream about space, build skyscrapers, or obsess about novels, it's not surprising that we can't stop thinking about where we'll get our next meal. Collectively, we've put so much thought and ingenuity into getting food that we can now just get our food to come to us, with little conscious effort. This video is part one of a three-part video series relating to big questions of life and the universe, made possible by a grant from the Templeton World Charity Foundation. You can find our sources and further reading in the video description, or get the Consciousness book by Rupert Glasgow for free, linked down below. If you want to help us make more videos, you can do so on patreon.com, or get one of our posters from our shop.
Upgrade. Today is the day for doing.
No ads. I hate the ones they won't let you skip.
Yeah, for real.
NASA announced today that they found aliens. Bacteria on Mars, weird alien fish in the oceans of Europa, and also ancient alien ruins on Titan. Wouldn't that be great? Well, no. It would be horrible news. Devastating even. It could mean that the end of humanity is almost certain, and that it might be coming soon. Why? Why would the most exciting discovery of our lifetime be bad? Let us imagine the development of life from its inception to us today as a flight of stairs. The first step is dead chemistry that needs to assemble itself into self-replicating patterns, stable and resilient, but also able to change and evolve. The second step is for our early life to become more complex, able to build more complicated structures, and use the available energy much more efficiently. On the next step, these cells combine to become multicellular beings, enabling unbelievable variety and further complexity. The step above sees the species evolve big brains, enabling the use of tools, culture, and shared knowledge, which creates even higher complexity. The species can now become the dominant life form on its planet and change it according to its needs. First, shy attempts to leave its planet are happening. This is where we are now. It's in the nature of life as we know it to reach out, to cover every niche it can. And since planets have a limited carrying capacity and lifespan, if a species wants to survive, it will look for more places to spread to. So the steps above the current one seem logical. Colonize your own solar system, then spread further to reach other stars, to the possible final step, becoming a galaxy-wide civilization. It's very likely that this is a universal principle for civilizations, no matter where they're from. If a species is competitive and driven enough to take control over its planet, they'll probably not stop there. We know that there are up to 500 billion planets in the Milky Way, at least 10 billion Earth-like planets. Many have been around billions of years longer than Earth. But we're observing 0 galactic civilizations. We should be able to see something, but there's nothing. Space seems to be empty and dead. This means something is preventing living things from climbing the staircase beyond the step we're on right now. Something that makes becoming a galactic civilization extremely hard, maybe impossible. This is the Great Filter, a challenge or danger so hard to overcome that it eliminates almost every species that encounters it. There are two scenarios. One means we are incredibly special and lucky. The other one means we are doomed and practically already dead. It depends on where the filter is on our staircase. Behind or ahead of us. Scenario 1. The filter is behind us. We are the first. If the filter is behind us, that means that one of the steps we pass is almost impossible to take. Which step could it be? Is life itself extremely rare? It's very hard to make predictions about how likely it is for life to emerge from dead things. There is no consensus. Some scientists think it develops everywhere where the conditions are right. Others think that Earth might be the only living place in the universe. Another candidate is the step of complex animal cells. A very specific thing happened on this step, and as far as we know, it happened exactly once. A primitive hunter cell swallowed another cell, but instead of devouring it, the two cells formed a union. The bigger cell provided shelter, took care of interacting with the environment and providing resources, while the smaller one used its new home and free stuff to focus on providing a lot of extra energy for its host. With the abundant energy, the host cell could grow more than before and build new and expensive things to improve itself, while the guest became the powerhouse of the cell. These cells make up every animal on the planet. Maybe there are billions of bacteria-covered planets in the Milky Way, but not a single one, apart from us, has achieved our level of complexity. Or intelligence. We humans feel very smart and sophisticated with our crossword puzzles and romantic novels, but a big brain is, first and foremost, a very expensive evolutionary investment. They are fragile. They don't help in a fistfight with a bear. They cost enormous amounts of energy. And despite them, it took modern humans 200,000 years to get from sharp sticks to civilization. Being smart does not mean you get to win automatically. Maybe intelligence is just not so great, and we're lucky that it worked out for us. Scenario 2. The filter is ahead of us. Plenty of others died already. A great filter before us is orders of magnitude more dangerous than anything we encountered so far. Even if a major disaster killed most of us or threw us back thousands of years, we would survive and recover. And if we can recover, even if it takes 1,000,000 years, then it's not a great filter, but just a roadblock to an eventual galactic civilization. On universal timescales, even millions of years are just the blink of an eye. If a great filter really lies before us, it has to be so dangerous, so purely devastating and powerful that it has destroyed most, if not all, advanced civilizations in our galaxy over billions of years. A really daunting and depressing hypothesis is that once a species takes control over its planet, it's already on the path to self-destruction. Technology is a good way to achieve that. It needs to be something that's so obvious that virtually everybody discovers it, and so dangerous that its discovery leads almost universally to an existential disaster. A large-scale nuclear war. Nanotechnology, genetic engineering of the perfect superbug. An experiment that lights the whole atmosphere on fire. It might be a super-intelligent AI that accidentally or purposely destroys its creators. All things that we can't even see coming right now. Or it's way simpler. Species competitive enough to take over their planet necessarily destroy it while competing with each other for resources. Maybe there are runaway chain reactions in every ecosystem that once set in motion are not fixable. And so once a civilization is powerful enough to change the composition of its atmosphere, they make their planet uninhabitable 100% of the time. Let's hope that that's not the case. If the filter is ahead of us, our odds are really bad. What we can hope for. This is why finding life beyond Earth would be horrible. The more common life is in the universe, and the more advanced and complex it is, the more likely it becomes that a filter is in front of us. Bacteria would be bad, small animals would be worse, intelligent life would be alarming. Ruins of ancient alien civilizations would be horrible. The best case scenario for us right now is that Mars is sterile, that Europa's oceans are devoid of life, and the vast arms of the Milky Way harbor only empty oceans hugging dead continents. That there are billions of empty planets waiting to be discovered and to be filled up with life. Billions of new homes waiting for us to finally arrive. How likely is it that we'll find life outside of Earth that is similar to us? Well, that depends on how many planets there are out there in their star's Goldilocks zone, the area around a star where water can be liquid. Because stars come in all sizes and configurations, this zone is different for every star system and requires a little bit of physics to figure out. If that sounds like fun to you, this quiz from Brilliant helps to break down the maths for exactly how this is calculated. Brilliant is a problem-solving website that teaches you to think like a scientist by guiding you through problems. They take concepts like these, break them up into bite-sized bits, present clear thinking in each part, and then build back up to an interesting conclusion. If you visit brilliant.org/nutshell or click the link in the description, you can sign up for free and learn all kinds of things. And as a bonus for Kurzgesagt viewers, the first 688 people will also get 20% off their annual membership. And
y'all think they aliens on the Earth with us right now? What do you think, Jarrell? Aliens been here before?
I mean, I'm pretty sure they've been here. I feel like they could have been. I mean, this planet's been on here, been around for a very long time. So I'm sure like at least one alien civilization has entered the Milky Way into the solar system. At least one time. You know, it's been here for very long, and if life does exist, if it does, and it exists in the Milky Way, I feel like that's kind of likely.
Yeah.
With planets. Ever since Copernicus showed us we were not the center of the universe, we have tried to emphasize that Earth is probably not that special or unique. As it turns out, that might not be the case after all.
So here it's called the Fermi Paradox. I like this guy right here, Isaac Arthur. Everybody's
So
debating
today,
the
we
Fermi
return to the
Paradox for
Great Filter
decades now.
series to continue our look at the Fermi Paradox. As a reminder, one of the more popular solutions to the Fermi Paradox, the strange seeming absence of other intelligent life in our huge and ancient universe, is that Occam's razor applies in this case, and that the reason for the seeming absence of other civilizations is exactly that. They don't exist. While we can consider the possibility that they existed in the past, but all died out after getting technology, the alternative explanation is that they just don't occur much. Since there is no obvious reason why they wouldn't, we tend to assume that there are, instead, a lot of little steps and conditions involved in a planet becoming life-bearing, and staying that way long enough for life to get intelligent. Each of those steps and conditions is called a filter, basically a hurdle you would need to get past that filters out potential civilizations arising on that planet. Last time, we defined a number of different types of filters, from lesser to greater, the former being ones that most will pass through, coin flip odds or better, while the latter is more comparable to lottery odds or less. I also mentioned before that you can often group related small filters into one great filter, though you cannot always do the reverse and break a great filter into a collection of smaller component ones. This series focuses on possible great filters, and while we discussed 3 last time, we are only looking at 1 for this episode, and will generally stick to that. Our focus for today is the famous rare Earth hypothesis, and more specifically the conditions about Earth and our solar system, which might make it nearly uniquely suited among planets to host intelligent life and technological species. I want to emphasize intelligent and technologically advanced right up front, because for the Fermi paradox, we don't care about some barren, twilight planet hosting simple lichen, not unless that lichen has developed a complex and enlightened civilization building spaceships and radio transmitters. So while we can look at a place like Pluto and say, yes, there's a chance life might develop there in some deep subsurface pocket of muddy water warmed by nuclear decay or tidal heating, we can also rule it out as a place to look for alien homeworlds. There's just not enough energy flux there to allow a complex and fast ecosystem that would permit intelligence to arise. Brains are very expensive in terms of energy and organs demanding resources, and have to be constantly of value at every step of an evolutionary progression. An oak tree doesn't have a brain, for instance, because it would offer no advantage to its survival, not when it has no means to implement any of the decisions that brain makes. So outside of the specific case of a Boltzmann brain or something parallel, where the brain just sort of blunders into existence fully formed, we are justified in assuming only a high-energy environment could offer enough life to generate such a predator-prey mental arms race, and do so quickly enough for it to have already happened. Evolution takes time, but more importantly, it takes generations, and more complex critters tend to have longer generational cycles. Bacteria can reproduce hourly, we do not. There have been an estimated 100 billion humans who have ever lived, or 10 to the 11th. We can estimate that maybe a billion times that many mammals have ever lived, or 10 to the 20th, most on an annual or longer generational cycle. Throw in insects, who are far more numerous and have been around much longer, and you can go up about a billion times more, 10 to the 29. And if we include bacteria, perhaps a trillion times that many, 10 to the 42nd, have ever lived. Each of those organisms represents an evolutionary event, mostly a failed or meaningless one. But that gives you an idea how many of these events need to take place to generate some folks sitting around a campfire, sharpening stone axes and wondering what the pretty points of light in the sky mean. Most of those events had nothing to do with your genetic makeup. A better designed oak leaf is unrelated to your own DNA, but growing intelligence is a reaction to the entire ecosystem evolving, so it does matter. It is not hard for an organism to learn to eat grass properly. They don't need a ton of brains or sensory gear for that. They need it for responding to other animals who either want to eat that same grass or eat them. We will talk more about the brain race in the future, but for today I mention it primarily to emphasize how many overall generations and individual evolutionary events were needed to get here. If that is fairly normal, then we have to consider that any planet that can support less life, or requires it to live slower, is less likely to have gotten technology by now because of fewer of those evolutionary events. Make the year 10% longer, and the critters that breed annually around the food supply of seasons evolve 10% slower, though that is probably optimistic, since they would need bigger food stores to survive the longer winter, and therefore support fewer of those critters to do the evolving. We will talk about this more in the future, but for now it's important to remember that we're not discussing where life could exist, or even where technology might eventually develop, but where it is likely to have already developed. After all, the universe is fairly young still. We will start there. Once the universe explodes into existence, it takes a long while to develop a structure where Earth-like planets can be common. And today we are going to try to assume that it almost has to be an Earth-like planet to offer a good chance for civilizations to emerge. So what do we know about Earth that matters? The first step is to ask about its basic position in time and space. Earth is not an old planet at all. The universe was about 9 billion years old already when it formed. If we compare the entirety of time to one 24-hour day starting at midnight, Earth formed at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 2/3 of the way through the day. Life didn't crawl up on land till an hour before midnight. Now you already know that it took a long while for enough heavy elements to form in dying stars to produce rocky planets like Earth, but it did not take that long. Earth's composition relates to the metallicity of our own sun. that being all the stuff in a star besides hydrogen and helium, the only two elements that existed in any real quantity prior to the stars making them. We often also look at this as the ratio of iron to hydrogen in a star. Iron incidentally being the most abundant element on Earth, just beating out oxygen, which is the third most common element in the universe. The relation of those two is pretty important as well, since our oxygen-rich atmosphere only came after the iron in the upper crust of the planet became saturated with more oxygen that it could sequester, even with tectonic activity turning over new iron. Oxygen is obviously very important to high-energy mobile life forms, as is the oxygenetic photosynthesis process that provides all of our food and releases that oxygen. Oxygen that also, consequently, poisoned off the life that lived before then and used anoxygenic photosynthesis, or other far weaker energy sources that don't rely on sunlight. Likewise, oxygen is an excellent fuel, or oxidizer, and its sheer abundance everywhere in the universe should tend to make it the preferred substance for critters to consume. We each use nearly a kilogram of it every day. Our sun's metallicity, Z, is 0.0196, or meaning just under 2% of the sun's mass is stuff other than hydrogen and helium. As I said, we are also often interested in the iron to hydrogen ratio, partially because it matters for planet formation, but mostly because it's a lot easier to determine both iron and hydrogen content of stars than most of the other stuff in them. From this, we can make a good guess at the rest of the elements. Metallicity is a bit more intuitive though, and it is what I will use to discuss this. However, if you go hunting for more data, you will see as many graphs with FeH on its axis as Z for metallicity, and it helps to avoid confusion. So the Sun is 2% metals, and so essentially were all of the early planets forming out of the nebula that became our solar system. That got quite hot, and when the Sun ignited, it started adding radiation and solar wind to the mix. Planets lost all their helium and neon, the second and fourth most abundant elements in the modern universe. They are quite light and easily blown away, and being noble gases, they are so aristocratic and snobby they won't even hang out with each other, let alone the peasant elements. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon are all pretty light too, but they can form heavy molecules that stuck around. However, the overabundance of hydrogen meant that most couldn't find any dance partners, and so they also blew away. Oxygen is likewise very common and will dance with almost anyone, so most of the hydrogen that didn't blow away paired up with them as water. So the warmer planets of the inner solar system are rocky, not so much because they started out with more of those elements than the Sun or the outer gas giants, but rather because those are the main things that stuck around under the heat. Their absence from the thousands of exoplanets we've found so far does not indicate rarity. It is just that it is far easier to see big planets and those close to their sun, so we see a lot of very big and hot planets. It would seem a safe bet, though, that you need a metallicity decently close to our own suns or higher to get many large rocky planets. The metallicity of stars is always higher the younger they are, not because they lose that as they age, but because as the universe ages, the amount of metals increases, as more and more stars go supernova, so the younger, newer ones tend to be higher. However, there are plenty of stars younger than ours with lower metallicity, and somewhat older ones with higher metallicity. Most are not, however. We are pretty much in the thick of the bell curve in that regard. You can find a fair number which are 1 billion or more years older than ours with higher metallicity, but they start getting very scant at more than 8 billion years of age. We can, however, safely conclude that systems with lots of rocky planets, with the same basic composition as our own, have been quite common since at least 1 billion years before our own came into existence, and perhaps a few more. We generally divide stars into populations 1 and 2, and the really old ones are labeled population 3, based on how much metal they have. That's a very broad and arbitrary categorization, so it might be that not all population 1 metal-rich stars like our own sun population 2 stars do. Indeed, we found planets around fairly low metallicity stars too. What this establishes, however, is that we cannot consider the metallicity of our own sun and its age to be more than a lesser or minor filter itself in terms of setting boundaries, though those lesser filters can stack up, as we discussed before. Ditto the fact that we often discard the inner galaxy as a place for life because of all the radiation and higher star density sterilizing planets or perturbing their orbits. But the spiral arms of our galaxy are quite heavy in metal-rich population 1 stars, so this isn't much of a filter either. It should be noted, though, that the further you get from a galactic core in galaxies like our own, the less metals you tend to have. So we have a galactic Goldilocks zone. Too close, radiation and perturbation. Too far, and there are not enough metals. But realistically, it is hard to argue that this is much more than a lesser filter. So, that gives us 2 lesser filters so far. We will treat both as 50-50.
Do you have to have a rocky planet for life, though?
I suspect we're being generous for both, and it's more likely less than 50-50. Of course, everything I just said applies only to stable spiral arm galaxies. When you look at other types, the conditions tend to be less favorable. And as I mentioned on this topic before, you can't just write off other galaxies from the Fermi paradox. However, for today, we will focus on our own galaxy, so we can use its total stellar population as our comparison number at the end, and also bypass further complicating stuff like quasars, galactic mergers, and so on. Though it is also worth remembering that our own galaxy is a serious cannibal, and has eaten a ton of lesser galaxies, though by and large this sort of process shouldn't tinker too much with how habitable various individual solar systems are. This and other factors have to be considered. For example, a star's orbit around a galaxy being stable and not passing through the hazardous core, or too close to big dense pockets of stars. I will add that as another lesser filter, and we will call that the safe galactic orbit filter. A lot of stars are also binaries or in packs so dense they would tend to destabilize planetary orbits, and we will make that our 4th lesser filter. Again, that's probably being generous. Now another one that gets suggested a lot is being hit by a supernova shockwave, or a dreaded gamma ray burst, but that needs some quick context. You need to be very close to one to get a planet sterilizing event that can kill off even deep ocean life, and that won't be too common. Nevertheless, if it kills off all large land life, which would take a lot less impact, you do get a substantial reset. Yes, lots of bacteria will survive, probably even lots of insects, and certainly stuff deep in the ocean unless we got really whammy, but they will recover fairly quickly and let evolution fill up the missing niches again. Extinction events are hard to classify for the Fermi paradox, though. That's because it's hard to predict how common major or near-total ones were even in Earth's history, let alone that of other solar systems in general. Coupled with that, such events can often be beneficial, clearing and leveling the Darwinian battleground, as it were. Dinosaurs were probably already on their way out, but if that asteroid had not hit, we might not be here today. So I'm going to ball up all the various extraterrestrial extinction causes, supernovae, gamma ray bursts, asteroid bombardment, etc., into one rather nebulous filter, and that one I will make our first minor filter. As a reminder, lesser filters were the kind we thought lowered the odds to no worse than a coin flip, while minor was anything that most did not pass through but wasn't terrible odds, no lower than 1%. And for our final calculation today, I'll treat it as 10%.
Everybody been
Again,
waiting
we are
on this
using the
stuff.
favorable values.
I said everybody up here been
Now,
waiting on
not all
this. Our
suns are the
winters
same.
is so long.
And what we
It's
call
just
our sun, a
ridiculous.
yellow dwarf, it is actually one of the most massive stars out there.
Like the week before you
It
got
got
here, I
that
was still wearing my
misnomer
jacket
because
to
in
work.
the
That's why
early
I had my
catalog,
jacket
we
in
could
the car
only
for
see
so
the
long.
biggest and brightest stars, just as now we can only
Yeah,
see
like
the
the week
biggest
before.
and hottest
It
exoplanets.
just got hot like this.
Interestingly, the sun is about as massive as a star can be and still support life. Stellar lifetime shortens exponentially with a rise in mass, as it's cubed, so a star twice our mass lives 1/2 cubed, or 1/8 as long. So if our sun was even 30% more massive, it would be just about ready to die by now. To make things worse, since a star gets hotter as time goes by, its habitable zone will probably have shifted much more noticeably during that time, rendering some planets uninhabitable that used to be habitable. That is expected to happen here on Earth in the next billion or so years. Even if the sun's main sequence normal lifetime will still have a few billion years left on the clock. This is not a good filter though, because only a small percentage of stars are actually massive enough to live so short a time. It matters only if we are assuming life is limited to other G-type stars. As a G2 star, our sun is fairly large even for other G-type stars. That scale goes from 0 to 9, with 0 being largest and 9 smallest. Of the 7 classic spectral types, O, B, A, F, G, K, and M, only K and M are smaller than G, but each of those groups has a higher population than the other 5 combined. The habitability of all those stars is therefore of great interest to us, as they are way more numerous, and we did one of the earliest episodes on that topic. But we actually don't care about them for today's topic because of what I mentioned earlier about total evolutionary events. For a civilization to emerge, it needs a decently high number of those total events. It is a regrettably clumsy and ham-fisted way to look at the issue, and we'll spend more time on it later in the series. But for now, we have to consider that if a planet is tidally locked to a small red dwarf star, as we have decent reason to think would tend to be the case, that planet has a far smaller habitable region to support life. Less space, less life, therefore fewer evolutionary events. Again, we don't care if they've got life, we care if they've evolved into civilizations. We also need to keep in mind that photosynthesis on Earth does not use all of the sun's spectrum, and smaller stars emit even less light in that photosynthetic range. Less useful available energy, less life. More of the material in that life devoted to basic fuel gathering rather than other survival tasks, and so on. It does not mean all those stars are uninhabited. There's a lot of question marks about tidal locking, atmosphere slowing locking or being torched away, solar activity being more erratic, and so on. But they are not good candidates to produce civilizations, and they make up 90% of the stars. So I will give this one minor filter status too, though we will also attach to this category things that make stars erratic in their output as well. Our sun is pretty stable compared to most. So we were at 4 lesser and 2 minor filters so far. How about planetary position? Each star has a habitable zone. We roughly classify that as any place where water is a liquid, not too hot, not too cold. That's very debatable since you could have moons around gas giants that were warm enough by tidal heating, for instance, but it is a decently solid filter. Not because such zones are rare, every star has one, and we think most stars have planets these days, so one being there isn't too improbable. However, we have to consider 3 important factors on this. First, what are the odds that the planet is about as massive as Earth? Doesn't matter if some tiny planet like Mars is there, it could never hoard an atmosphere that close to the sun for billions of years. Doesn't matter if a big planet like Jupiter is there, no life is evolving on a gas giant. Not to technological civilizations anyway, although maybe a large moon around one might. That last wouldn't seem too probable though, since no moon in our solar system is even close to being as massive as Earth. Ganymede is the biggest, actually larger than Mercury though less massive, and has a surface gravity that's only 15% of Earth's. So we have to consider that it needs to be a planet decently close to Earth's own size, though how close is hard to say. I said 3 things though, and the second would be that it needs to be staying inside that habitable zone. Most planets don't have circular orbits. Earth has one of the lowest orbital eccentricities, Venus lower still, while Mercury has the highest. Odds are pretty good that the official habitable zones are already too generous and those near the edges won't be hospitable for life. If you add eccentricity into that, it gets worse. And of course, even if a system has a habitable zone with planets near it, there might not be one actually in it. So we'll make that lesser filter 5. No planet of any sort happens to occupy the habitable zone when the system forms. For number 6, we will include the chance that the planet gets itself knocked out of orbit, or captured or ejected out of the system, or into the sun. Orbits are not nearly as stable as we often think. Odds are better than good that not all of the planets we started out with in our solar system are still here, and probably aren't all quite where they began. Indeed, it seems likely that at least one time Earth got smacked by one, and it's also a pretty popular theory that one nailed Venus, causing its peculiarly slow spin, thus having a day longer than its year. Systems with more planets would probably be even more vulnerable to such things, especially if they had big planets closer in. The mass of a planet in the habitable zone, if we have one, matters a lot. We do not have a good inventory of planets yet to say what percentage of them are of any certain size, but we have started finding a lot of super-Earths out there in habitable zones or closer, so we know there's no special barrier against their existing. In between things like Mercury and Jupiter is a mass difference of about 1,000, and you could go bigger or smaller and still have that habitable zone dominated by that planet, so no others could be there. We cannot assume that planets are evenly distributed by mass, that there's as many planets twice the size of Earth as there are half the size or 10 times the size. Indeed, what we do know suggests otherwise. But if we did assume that for the moment, then we have a major filter right there, because of possible planets, from dwarf planets just big enough to dominate their orbit, to super-Jovians nearly big enough to count as a star. Only a tiny range of those could plausibly support the kind of life we are interested in, even if we are stretching plausibility. We will give this one minor filter status, our third, though it would not be hard to argue it was a major filter all on its own. We just don't know, and where there is uncertainty, we will err on the side of generosity today. So 3 minor and 6 lesser. I'm going to bypass our day length and axial tilt, because those are very dependent on our moon. Arguably so is crustal composition, since the moon formed when we got whacked by some other planet, or rather when 2 planets smack each other to form our current one and the moon. For a long time, we thought the moon itself such an anomaly that it might be a great filter all by itself. But newer models say that such giant moons might not be so uncommon after all. Uncommon or ultra-rare, our big moon is a huge factor in all sorts of things that make our planet stable and livable.
People don't realize how big our moon
many of
is
those
compared to
factors
other
just seem to
planets.
better the odds for life, not really excluded for
Our moon
Earth-like
is
planets
fucking
without a
huge.
moon. So while we should probably still list the moon as a major filter overall, I will keep it at minor filter status. We used to be sure the moon was a key factor, as I said, but one of the examples for that is that life began in tidal pools, and the moon dominates those, but the sun alone causes decent tides, and we also tend to tilt more to expecting life to have emerged around underwater thermal vents, so I feel we should hedge our bets and say minor. Speaking of those thermal vents, our planet's tectonic activity and molten core are with a protective magnetosphere, as well as ensuring plate tectonics that both give us thermal vents and help create a geological cycle that replenishes elements on the surface and ensures there is surface land that hasn't been eroded away, making the planet all one big sea. Yet while such activity is vitally important, and probably less common on smaller planets for instance, we have already excluded those, and we don't have too much reason to think there's a very narrow zone of these permissible that most Earth-sized planets would lack. These are both very big factors though. A planet's magnetosphere controls whether or not it can keep an atmosphere in the long term, and the spin rate of planets affects that, while at the same time, the faster a planet spins, the stronger the erosive winds and storms trying to erode away the land. Too much tectonic activity could be devastating. Indeed, considering how many cities were ruined by earthquakes in the past, if those were stronger and more common, folks might never settle down to build cities. And yet too little of such activity, and you wouldn't have land masses or the geological pump that brings up new minerals and helps sequester oxygen early on. Too many uncertainties. So again, we will be cautious and call each just a lesser filter, placing us at 8 lesser and 4 minor. There are so many others we could look at, and many we've just shoved together into broader filters. There are many more still to come, too. We've just looked at those which are characteristic of our planet's composition and position, those core rare earth filters. But that was our focus for today, so let's total them up. Remember that we classified a great filter as something virtually none past, 1 in a million at best, and often worse. We also said that for our totaling today, we would treat a lesser filter as 50-50 and a minor one as 1 in 10. Many of them we looked at today were probably way worse odds than that. But let's see how we come out with 8 lesser and 4 minor ones. Cumulative odds can just be multiplied together. The odds of flipping a coin is 1 in 2. The odds of doing so twice in a row, 1/2 times 1/2, or 1 in 4, 3 times 1 in 8. So our 8 lesser filters are 1 in 2 to the 8th, or 1 in 256. Not bad. Our 4 minor filters, 1 in 10, are worse. 1 in 10 to the 4th, or 1 in 10,000. Combined together, they equal 1 in 2,560,000, less than 1 in a million. So we establish a good case for the conditions on Earth to be a great filter. Incidentally, if we treated those 4 minor filters as just 1%, our lower in value 4 minor filters, it would be 1 in 2,560,000,000, not a million. But our goal was just to show that it qualified as a great filter, not the worst case scenario. Even that value, though, would still leave 100 planets in our galaxy with those conditions,
The message
and our
is
more
for
moderate
her or
value
from
would allow
her?
for 100,000. But it does seriously lower the odds for civilizations to
Wrong
emerge
number,
and
buddy.
flourish.
Huh?
Some
Tell me
folks
it's the
stop
wrong
here.
number.
Indeed, many of the filters
I
we
did, but it's
used
even like
could
flipping,
easily be
like
boosted to
car
minor
insurance,
filter status,
stuff
not
like
lesser.
that.
And in doing so would smash the odds down to a lot less than one such planet, a galaxy. But for my part, I tend to think we are in about the right zone
Yeah,
with our
that's
figures,
one of those scams
and
or
that it
something.
is the filters that come after this in developing intelligence and technology that help sweep the odds further down. There is so much uncertainty to all these values, and the reasoning behind them, that we just can't say much for sure. But this is the basis of the rare Earth solution to the Fermi paradox. And as you can see, it makes a pretty good case for Earth-like planets that can foster technological civilizations to be quite uncommon, and possibly so rare that you won't find one even in the entire galaxy. Next time in this series, we will look at the biological side of things in more detail, and see how all those factors can stack up to form yet another great filter. But before that, we will be discussing some other topics. And in next week's episode, we will examine the popular science fiction concept of force fields, and see if there is any room for that to become a science reality, not science fiction, and also discuss some of the fun things you could do with them if you had them. For alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button and share with others. If you want to discuss this topic some more, head down to the comments section below, or join the over 10,000 members on our Facebook group, Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a great week.
Now that's going back to alien life. Is like, even to have a planet that is suitable for life, that shit is almost impossible. And then to have life actually evolve, that shit is almost impossible. And then to have it become technologically advanced, and that shit is rare, super rare. And some people think like we are the first.
Is that what you're on? Like, you think that we're the first?
In our galaxy, yeah. I don't think that, because like you said, by now we would have seen, if there was another spacefaring civilization, and there are this planet here, they would have came here. Or some people say they went to Mars and all this shit, but
Milky Way is a big place. Like, there could be one, like, on the total opposite place that we're on. and that our telescope can't zoom in that far to see that area of the Milky Way is actually populated.
Exactly. And that's how we know if they are out there, they never came here. They never been to our solar system.
It doesn't, like, realistically, it doesn't really seem worth it to interact with us, seeing like traveling takes like a lot of resources.
Exactly.
So
So say that we can only say like we don't know. But in our solar system, in our galaxy is like we are probably the first intelligent life that is technologically advanced. Like I don't know if you've been to the moon and all that, but I'm pretty sure we've left the surface of our planet. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
how much ingenuity does that take? How many generations does it take to build up to do something like that? And then still like we're contemplating going to other planets and stuff like within our solar system, but still leaving our own planet. Like that shit is, I don't know, like humans are some super rare occurrence and we can't even understand what our consciousness is. How long we been in here? An hour? Already made an hour. I'm probably about to wrap it up, guys. It's hot. I had to work today. I'm about to eat. Probably game for a little while. I might stream some video games.
oh, you trying to play together?
I'm not playing up here.
I'll play it.
That red controller broke. One of the trigger buttons don't work. They're the only two. I need to get a controller. I need to get some headphones. All my shit is jacked up. I need to get started on some new paintings. I'm procrastinating. Oh, but this one is looking nice. I got my show set up today, and well, I got most of the paintings hung. Still gotta hang two. And I forgot to bring tape to put the hang tags with the titles and prices on them, so I have to do that the day of. But it's mostly everything that I did at my last show. I think I got like a few older pieces in there, like 3 or 4 older pieces, and a semi-old piece that wasn't in my show, and a new piece that wasn't in my show. But like I say, for the people who didn't make it to my show, it'll be all good for them. For the people who did come to my show, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I saw this stuff," and I don't care. I don't care if you saw it. Like I said, that's why I made sure to swap out some stuff that wasn't in the last show that I did. But that's the thing, though. I've been so many places this year. I've had a show every month this year. It's like, geez, I need to get painting more because everybody is starting to see all of my stuff.
Get more popular.
Yeah, it's finally starting to break through. That's why I just try to focus on this stuff so hard. I need to always have new art, and that's one of my biggest claims to fame in this area is like when there's events and everything out. Like normally, I always have new artwork. A lot of other artists be struggling to make new artwork. Now I see how they feel because I'm at that point now where it's like, I'm running out of ideas. Need to think bigger. But then I've seen so much art in the past couple years too. It's like there's a lot of good stuff out there. So I need to make my concept strong and bold and unique in a way. Alright. Could I paint you? Yeah, bro. you can inbox me on my social media, and we can discuss some prices and stuff, or whatever you want. I just finished the commission. It should be going out soon.
This one's beautiful.
Yeah, this is. It took a minute to get it done. It's done. But this is a commission I just finished right here. This is actually for a friend of mine's. Yeah, all you gotta do is you see the message bar at the bottom of the screen. Paint is by the Prince. You can hit me up on Instagram, Facebook. I don't normally be on Tumblr, but Twitter, however you want to send me a message. And all you gotta do is see the picture first. So you show me the photo you want done. I'll look it over. If it's a lot of detail in it like this one, I'm gonna have to charge you or add some money. If it's something kind of simple, something simpler like that, you can get a easy light price. But my work is flawless, so you're gonna get what you pay for. I ain't even tell you how many hours this thing took. Thanks, bro. And you can have your own very custom, one of a kind, original oil painting by yours truly. Art only appreciates in value. It becomes sentimental. You turn into a family heirloom. Art is always a good investment. This is my homie's second painting too. He already got one from me a couple years ago. Now you got that one done. Oh, this whole house is gonna be full of my art. Alright, appreciate everybody tuning in, checking out the art, the progress on the portraits. If this is your first time in the stream, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and PlayStation Network if you guys are on PlayStation. And hope you guys have a good evening. If you're not chasing your own dreams, you're chasing somebody else's dreams. Peace. Catch y'all tomorrow. Oh, I need a controller. I don't know why I thought this was a PlayStation controller.